Thank you so much for joining us on another edition of At Issue. My name is H. Wayne Wilson, and we have the pleasure for the next half hour of hearing about what's happening in Washington, D.C. from the 18th Congressional District Congressman Aaron Schock, a Republican who calls Peoria home. Thank you for joining us,
Thanks,
Congressman.
H. Good to be with you.
First, a description of the 18th Congressional District from the northern part of Peoria County over to Bloomington, down to Springfield, west to the Mississippi, including Quincy.
Excellent description.
Okay.
205 towns.
In other words, Cheri Bustos, who has the 17th, your district and her district are kind of like that.
That's right.
But before we start on some serious topics, both of us had an opportunity to do some reading last week.
That's right.
I had a chance to read to Mrs. Shaw's class, and Mrs. Shaw had some fourth graders out at Keller School in Peoria, and I was able to visit with Mrs. Shaw and her students. So thank you to all of you. And you know what? Aaron, we heard some tough words. Sullen, S-U-L-L-E-N.
Wow.
For fourth graders.
Wow.
And I'm, going, really? We're talking about sullen and treachery and things of that nature.
Well, I read to Miss Nelson and Mrs. Ganchow's class, and it was special for me because Keller is actually not only in my congressional district, but it's my alma mater. I graduated the fourth grade at Keller, so it's always fun to go back to a school you were, a little more of a little tyke when you went there originally. So,
did you have any idea in fourth grade that you would be Congressman Schock?
No, absolutely not.
What were you going to be?
A businessman. I was going to be very. My goal was to be successful in business and retire early. So, then the school board got in my way, and the rest is history.
Well, let's talk about some things that are in the way. Sequestration. I'm quite sure that the audience is sick and tired of hearing terms like fiscal cliff, sequestration, and other terms that we're not even sure we understand it. What is Congress doing? What's coming up here in the next 2 months?
Well, a lot is coming up in the next 2 months. As you know, the first piece of legislation that was dealt with literally on the first day of this year, January 1st, was a bill dealing with a portion of the fiscal cliff. The fiscal cliff was really a term used to describe a convergence of a number of big issues that were going to happen this year. The fiscal cliff included the largest tax increase in a generation, which were basically the 01 and 03 Bush tax cuts, all expiring on January 1. That vote was taken 12 years ago that those taxes would expire on January 1 of this year. There were four things: the tax cuts going up, the sequestration across the board cuts going into effect, which were resulted as a result of the negotiation of the debt limit 2 years ago, $2 trillion in cuts that were to begin this year. The continuing resolution, which is basically the bill that keeps government funded and operating. And the final piece is the debt limit, which is basically the authorization for the federal government to be able to borrow money to make good on its obligations. Those four pieces of legislation, those four topics, are still going to be dealt with in the first 6 months of this year, really, and only one of them has been dealt with so far, and that was really the negotiated compromise between Joe Biden and the Congress over the Christmas break holiday, where we basically came up with an extension of all those Bush-era rates, if you will, for households below $450,000, and then the rates went up on everyone above that as they were set to do 12 years ago. So the other three issues really are left to be dealt with. The continuing resolution, the debt limit, and that sequestration we're going to have to deal with in the next 3 or 4 months.
Regarding sequestration, it's mandatory cuts in defense, mandatory cuts in discretionary spending.
Correct.
Over a 10-year period.
Correct. So the real simple way for folks to understand this is we have $1, and of that dollar, 40 cents is borrowed. So we only have 60 cents of the dollar, but we spend $3.5 trillion. Of that dollar that we spend, 65 cents of the dollar goes to support Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and interest on the debt. The other 35 cents roughly is evenly split, almost exactly, $660 billion roughly on defense, $660 billion roughly on discretionary spending. Discretionary spending really is what people think of when they think of government when it's not defense and it's not Medicare, Medicaid, or Social Security. So everything from education spending to transportation spending to NASA, you name it, public television, that's all in that discretionary spending. What the sequestration does is it says we're going to take $1 trillion out of defense and $1 trillion out of discretionary over the next 10 years. So roughly $100 billion a year out of each one of those for the next 10 years. But to your point, what it doesn't touch is that non-discretionary, non-defense spending, which are entitlement programs, Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, which is 65 cents of the dollar we're spending right now, and why so many of us in Washington, D.C. recognize that we're really not going to get our debt under control unless we make significant changes to save those programs and save us from a debt crisis.
In your opinion, in your conversations with other congressmen, what is the likelihood, what is possible in terms of entitlement programs being changed? What might we see, reasonably speaking?
Well, one thing that's been very frustrating as a House member is that the House of Representatives really has been the only adult in the room because we're the only ones to pass a budget. So really, we're the only ones with a plan that says, here's our revenues, here's our expenses, and this is what America will look like over a 10-year budget window, which is what you have to do when you pass a budget. For the first time since the 1974 Budget Act, Gerald Ford, Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, George Bush, Bill Clinton, every president and every Congress since the 1974 Budget Act has passed a budget until the last 4 years under the Senate. The Senate has refused to pass a budget. And so what we decided to say was, you know what, rather than negotiating with ourselves over our Medicare plan, as you know, Paul Ryan, our budget chairman, laid out a very comprehensive Medicare plan. He's gotten beat up a little bit, people critical of it, but it's the only plan to make Medicare solvent. So what we want to say is, what we've said is, if you don't like our plan, that's fine, but then you got to have another plan. And so we passed a no budget, no pay bill that passed the House of Representatives with overwhelming bipartisan support. 200 Republicans, nearly 100 Democrats, went over to the Senate, and the Senate just passed it last week. So the Senate has embraced this idea that, you know what, they need to do their job or they're not going to get paid, which may sound not too novel to most Americans, that they know if they don't do their job, they don't get paid. So the minute the Senate produces a budget, they're going to either have to show us how they dramatically raise taxes to continue to fund the unfunded liabilities in Medicare and Social Security, or they're going to have to do something similar to what we do in the House, which is start making changes to Medicare and Social Security for younger Americans so these programs are solvent and around for the next generation. Once the Senate passes a budget, the House has already done this. We've already passed a budget that does entitlement reforms. Then we can have the serious conversation, negotiate to the center, which is what happens in divided government. We have Republicans in the House, Democrats in the Senate. Nobody's going to get everything they want. We got to negotiate.
What one thing in Medicare, what one thing in Social Security might change?
Well, in Social Security, it's not easy, but it's pretty quick to identify what's happening. People are living too long. Not too long, but they're living much longer. Nobody lives too long.
Really say that?
Yeah. People are living longer, and they're not having as many kids. You look at when Social Security was started under President Roosevelt, the average age you had to be to get the entitlement was 60. The average life expectancy was 58. So the fact of the matter was more people died than ever got the benefit of Social Security when it first started. Today, it's 65, and the average life expectancy is 78. And in the 30s, there were 15 people working for every one person drawing. Today, there's only 3 people working for every one person drawing. So what needs to happen is you've got to extend the age. You're going to have to work a little bit longer. For younger people, people like me got to know, might have to work another year or two, or might have to start saving now so that I can still retire when I want, but I won't get my Social Security benefit for a little bit longer. And the income that you pay tax on, right now it's $113,000. So if you make $114,000 or $115,000, you don't pay any more tax on that. We might have to increase that tax cap a little bit to balance out the equation. But those are really the only things you do to Social Security, short of privatizing it, short of blowing the whole thing up, which I don't think, quite frankly, is politically possible. When Republicans controlled the House, the Senate, and the presidency under George W. Bush, he tried that and it didn't work. So I think we got to recognize that whatever we do is going to have to be a bipartisan solution, and I think it's going to be a combination of age and lifting the tax cap a little bit.
One change in Medicare.
Well, a couple things in Medicare. Number one, when you go on Medicare, there is no third-party administrator. And so when you have Blue Cross Blue Shield or Aetna or Humana, you have to get everything signed off on and approved before you basically get the service. Once you're on Medicare, there's no defined benefit. In other words, you can have unlimited benefit. There's very little incentive to seniors to use less. So when you're on Blue Cross Blue Shield, you might have copays, you might have certain pain that you feel as you use more health care, not so in your older years. So there are things that the private sector uses when you're younger that we use to incentivize people to live healthy, to make responsible choices that we need to adopt when it comes to Medicare. The other thing with Medicare is I don't think we should be subsidizing wealthy people's health care. Here's the fact. The average American citizen pays in about $55,000 in Medicare tax. The average American senior, before they pass away, will use $150,000 in benefit. So there's roughly a $95,000 unfunded liability from the average senior paying in to the average senior getting out. I think the fair question is, look, if you are poor, if your assets are depleted, certainly we as a society have a responsibility to take care of the elderly, the frail, the least among us. But if you are a wealthy individual, I'm not asking you to pay for other people's health care. What I'm simply saying is perhaps you should pay for more of your own health care. And maybe we should be subsidizing people who have significant assets in later years of their life, that they should make up more of that spread between the $50,000 they've paid in and the $150,000 in benefit they've gotten.
Dave Camp, who is the Republican chair of the House Ways and Means Committee, he's a Republican from Florida, has said flat out there will be tax reform legislation in 2013. What is that possible, and what might we see in terms of tax reform?
Well, he's the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee. So if he says there's going to be tax reform legislation, I believe him. He's been going about it in a very systematic approach. Last year, he laid out comprehensive corporate tax reform. But the reason we haven't passed any corporate tax reform is you've got to do individual tax reform at the same time. And the reason for that is that about 80% of businesses in America are actually not corporations. They're small businesses. They're family businesses that are organized as an individual, as what we call a pass-through entity, a subchapter S. And so they pay their taxes as an individual. So if you change the corporate rates without changing the individual rates, you put people at a competitive disadvantage. So you got to do them together. Dave Camp last week, or a couple of weeks ago now, laid out a couple of things he thinks we ought to look at. Loopholes, deductions, things that are kind of favorable to certain industries. He targeted hedge funds. He targeted derivatives that get traded up in Chicago and out in New York City that have certain tax preferences that he doesn't quite think are fair. And so he's starting to lay out very systematically areas that we can go after to create some fairness in the tax code, but then also bring down the rates for everybody. We have a 70,000-page tax code. And I'm not thinking not only most Americans have read it, I doubt most CPAs have read the 70,000-page tax code.
Or the IRS.
Or the IRS. So we think we can become much more competitive as a country if we throw out a lot of those 70,000-page tax codes. We're looking at taking the 6 individual rates right now and collapsing it down to 2. You'd pay 10% on your first $150,000 in earnings and 25% on everything over $150,000. It's going to take some pain, and people hear this and they think this is great. Simplify it, lower my rate, but they're going to give up certain deductions. Families get a per-child tax credit. Married folks get a marriage deduction. Most people get a mortgage deduction. So there are things that people are going to have to give up to get a lower rate. But at the end of the day, I think everyone believes you should pay something for the joy of being an American, for getting free public education, for driving on our roads and bridges, for having a strong national defense. You should all pay something. But in America right now, some people aren't paying anything. We have some big corporations like GE that posted record profits last year that paid 0 effective federal income tax. And that's not fair to companies like Caterpillar, who've made record profits, but have also paid their fair share of taxes. So we want to make sure companies and individuals are all paying something, but that we can lower the rate as a result of getting rid of some of these loopholes and deductions.
You're on board with all of what you've discussed because you're a member of Ways and Means, so
Yeah,
you're on board with
absolutely. The devil's always in the details, and obviously we've got to work with our Democrats and Republicans on the committee, but there is a strong bipartisan consensus that we got to give up, a lot of these deductions for, wind energy, ethanol. There's a lot of industries in my district that get preference in the tax code, but we've got to be willing to not have any sacred cows for the sake of everybody benefiting in America by lowering that rate and making America more competitive. We have, the highest corporate tax rate in the world. And we used to benefit. The Beatles, you were around for the Beatles.
I remember January of '64.
Okay.
Yes.
The Beatles.
You weren't around,
The
though.
Beatles became American citizens. And the reason, nobody talks about this, the reason the Beatles came to America was because of the tax rates. Because America has always enjoyed a more competitive tax system than our Europe counterparts. And so we've had great investment in this country. Entrepreneurs, innovators have come to this country. And guess what's happening now? They're leaving. Aon, the great insurance company in Chicago, not only left Illinois, but they left the U.S. for the UK because the UK now Great Britain has a more competitive tax rate for businesses. We got to change that.
Speaking of coming to America, let's talk about immigration. What should come first? Strengthening our borders with Mexico in terms of limiting those who cross the border illegally? Or should we first say, let's have some path to citizenship for some 11 million illegal aliens who are in the country right now?
A couple things. One, I think we're naive if we think that this challenge of having 11 million people here illegally is going to go away. They're not going to self-deport. They're not going to leave tomorrow. And in many cases, they're people who are a fabric of our society, are contributing in many ways through their family and through their work product. Having said that, as a member of Congress, I will tell you, the lines are rather long of people of all different countries who want to come to the greatest country on earth, who want to come to America and are trying to do it legally. And every day my office gets phone calls from people of all kinds of ethnicity who want to come here legally. My fear with immigration reform is that if we lay out the path for people who are here illegally, for how they become legal, before we have secured our borders, then we are only incentivizing more bad behavior. We are only incentivizing that person from China or Norway or Australia who wants to come here legally. If they see the path for how they do it illegally, they'll choose that path instead. And so, look, I don't think we should build a fence. I don't think we're going to be able to, create a German-style barricade. But we have to be able to, if we can secure our state borders, we should be able to secure our national borders as well, north and south primarily, the waterways as well. We've spent an enormous amount of money fighting wars overseas. We've spent an enormous amount of money on technology to send people to the moon and back. We can secure our borders. I'm confident of that. And that's why I think the bipartisan proposal that Marco Rubio and our own Senator Dick Durbin have come up with says we want a path towards legal status for people who are here illegally, but first we have to have verification that our borders are secure. That's what the bipartisan proposal that was laid out in the Senate says, and that's something that I can go along with.
But no wall.
Well, where it may make sense to build some kind of a wall, that's fine. But the people within my party who have suggested we could build a huge wall along the southern border, it's naive, and also it's not effective. We've shown that in portions where we have built a wall, people have been effective at building tunnels, going over the wall. So we have very smart national security folks out in Washington, D.C., and if they want to stop people from coming in here, if we give them the resources, I'm confident they can.
We have to talk about guns.
Sure.
Where do you stand personally with regard to the issue of limiting the assault weapons, limiting the size of magazines, And if we were to pass some sort of legislation that restricted those, would it even make any difference?
That's an excellent question, H. Look, I come from a family of hunters. Many don't know I grew up in rural Minnesota before I moved here when I was 10 years old. I learned to hunt there when I was very young, and have been a lifelong member of the NRA, and have a lot of constituents in my district where hunting ranks right up there in terms of their pastimes and priorities. But we also have to recognize the Second Amendment is not about hunting. If you read the Second Amendment of our Constitution, it talks about an armed militia, an armed citizenry, and for the right for them to be able to protect themselves not only from other Americans, but also from their government. And so that we have to be mindful of why our founders put that into effect. Second, I don't think anybody wants these travesties to continue. Nobody wants to. If somebody said, if you do X or Y, small children in communities in Connecticut will no longer be murdered. Violence in our schools or violence in our communities will be eliminated. I think anybody is willing to try and look at how do we stop that. But when it comes to the conversation about, well, let's try and take away guns as a means to accomplish less violence, we don't have to wonder what happens. We have case studies. We have states with strict gun laws. We have states with less strict gun laws. We have communities with strict gun laws. We have communities with less strict gun laws. And in Illinois, we have the city, one of the top 5 or 6 cities in the nation with the strictest gun laws in the nation. Chicago, Illinois has a stricter gun policy than LA. It has a stricter gun policy than Detroit or Miami, and it leads per capita in murder. There are more people murdered in Chicago per capita than Miami or LA. So first, we have to say, clearly strict gun laws in places like Chicago and others haven't worked. Let's talk about the assault weapons ban. You asked about that. Chris Shays, who's a congressman from Connecticut, who was the chief sponsor of the assault weapons ban back in the 90s when it passed, and vehemently fought for its passage, has now stated publicly that he would not vote for it again. He said it did very little to curb violence in our country, and it basically only limited those law-abiding citizens' rights and not the rights of criminals. So I'm not confident that it's going to be a gun law that stops the kind of violence. What I am sorry that we're not talking more about is mental health.
2 more issues before, and we're running out of time just like that, but I want to talk about your personal situation with regard to the Office for Congressional Ethics.
Yeah.
They're investigating your campaign for asking for more money than is legally allowed to help support Adam Kinzinger's campaign.
Sure.
Explain what the question is here.
Well, without getting too far in the details, I would just say we've been very honest with with not only the Office of Compliance, the Office of Compliance and Ethics, but also with the public about how I was helping Congressman Kinzinger with his race. Both me and Majority Leader Eric Cantor were very supportive of him in his primary that he recently had, and both of us sought legal counsel on how we could go about helping them. My attorneys, his attorneys, suggested that this was a legal way to contribute to a fund, and so we contributed to the fund. An outside group, which is the beauty of my job, an outside group, any American citizen and any group can file a complaint against me. They can say they think I did this wrong or I did that wrong. This group then does an investigation of it and then recommends it to the full ethics committee. They've done that 89 different times in the last year alone for members of Congress. So I'm not belittling it. I'm not suggesting that they shouldn't investigate it. But the beauty of this job is people accuse you of all kinds of things, and you then have to go through a process to show that what in fact you did was okay. And we're confident, as our legal representation have said, that we'll be cleared of any wrongdoing.
Was this a question of asking for more than $5,000? Is there some sort of a financial limit?
There's not, well, again, I don't want to get into the legal, but...
Or too difficult to explain?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to explain. When a member of Congress asks another member of Congress for donations, historically, limitations don't apply. Nancy Pelosi, who's the leader of the Democrats, John Boehner, who's the leader of the Republicans, asks their colleagues all the time for large contributions to their respective party. They'll say, hey, H, I need $100,000 for the National Democratic Party or the National Republican Party. When they're soliciting you as another member of Congress, they're not soliciting you like another member of the public. You have a different ability to raise money. You can either write it out of your campaign account, you can go ask your friends and neighbors. The law is different when it's a member to member. So that's why we feel pretty confident that we're okay here.
I need a real quick answer. Are you going to run for governor of Illinois?
You know, I'm looking at where I can do the most good. Right now, we have a lot of challenges in our state. We have a lot of challenges out in Washington, D.C., and I'm in a position right now in the Ways and Means Committee to do a lot of good. But my fear is if we don't change leadership in Springfield, I'm going to continue to see flight out of my district.
And with that, we have run out of time. Congressman Schock, it's always good to have you on the
Great to
program.
be with you.
Thank you for being here. And we'll be back next week with another edition of At Issue. Please join us then.